good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. And thank you for joining us in this lovely panel spotlighting the Black experience with MS. We try to do it more than just in February, trying to do a quarterly panel of it. My name is Bhavya Suri. I'm the health educator and the co-editor for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. And today I have two lovely ladies with me who are going to be our panelists and sharing their experiences. So I'll go ahead and get started. Dawn and Anne Marie, whoever wants to go first and just introduce yourselves, please go ahead.
Anne Marie, you go.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Johnson, and I am a person living with multiple sclerosis for over 20 plus years now.
And I am Dawn Morgan. I'm also living with MS. I have been living with MS for 25 years, May 23rd, 2000. I remember that date.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how, when you talk to you meet somebody, everyone can remember that date, I remember my date, New Year's Eve. I can even remember the time because it was a 10 o'clock appointment when I got the diagnosis. It's interesting, and like so many things that we have in common, when we meet others.
It's easy for me to remember because I started just a little about me. I started as a teacher, and so I had recently graduated, and then I was in graduate school, and I just enrolled, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. I'm starting my career as a teacher. This is fantastic. Eventually, I wanted to go in education policy and work for the Department of Education and
Nice.
that, but MS kind of took a front seat.
Or as I like to say, MS had other plans for you.
Yeah, I was going to say MS rerouted your plan to something else. So with that, I guess I'll get into the first question. How did and we'll start with Dawn since you brought up the topic, and then we'll go to you, Anne Marie. How did your sense of identity change when MS affected your ability to work or continue grad school in this instance?
Initially, I have to be honest, I was in denial. So it did not change because everything was invisible. And I thought, it's no big deal that there's no cure, but I'm not going to die. And, I can still wear my heels and I can still hang out with my friends. So I didn't attach myself to a loss at that time. And I think over the next, I would say decade, that's when things started to change. And as we all know, MS does progress in its own way, for some much sooner. And for me, it just took quite some time. And so I don't think that I felt the angst and the frustration and what you just spoke of until probably a decade later. And then I realized, okay, things have to change. I need to figure out what works best for me in this MS body. Because right now, working full time and, just having such a full schedule just did not fit any longer. And I reached a point where I didn't even know who I was. And so I completely lost my identity. And I know Anne Marie and I have had conversations about this, and she actually recently spoke about this. So she will probably take it from there. But you do lose your sense of purpose. And, I had put so much time, so much money, energy, and love into my career, and I had to shift. And that just didn't feel comfortable. And so I think I spent a few years in a spiral, not really knowing who I was.
And I think that's common for many of us. It's like you get these symptoms and you're trying to figure out what's going on. You go to the doctor, through the relationship with your doctor, you get a diagnosis, maybe sooner than later, sometimes later though, let's be honest. That's a whole nother conversation, especially when you talk about health inequities within our community. But all in all, when you get that definitive diagnosis of you have MS,
Mm-hmm.
it's a moment of, hmm, and the floodgate of questions. I know for myself, there was questions in terms of what is MS going to mean for me.
Mm-hmm.
I also had questions in terms of what is MS. I mean,
Right.
I didn't know anyone with MS. I definitely didn't see many people of color with MS at that time. All I knew was Richard Pryor and Montel Williams, and I was just like, okay, these are two rich Black men. I'm just some chick in Brooklyn trying to make it day by day. So what is MS going to mean for me? Also, my symptoms when initially was very pronounced. So I woke up and couldn't walk. I couldn't hold a cup. I had lost most of my fine motor skills. And just being in that space of grieving
Right.
who I was, I had to go through that. In time, though, I was able to gain much of my ambulation, but it wasn't perfect. As well as I still struggle with fine motor skills to the point where I don't really do any buttoned up shirts. I got to be careful wearing earrings. And, you try to find ways to continue the normality of your life. But at the end of the day, things are different, and just like any loss, whether it's a loss of a job, or, loss of a friendship, you know, this loss of who Amory was and trying to understand this new Amory, let alone accept that new Amory. It's a journey. I like to tell people just like grief is a journey, MS is a journey, and it has ebbs and flows, you know. I've been living with MS now for 20 years, and the person I am today is definitely not the person I was yesterday. But at the same time, Lord only knows what tomorrow holds.
I love that. So you both spoke on something. Dawn, you talked about having to change entirely your perspective once the MS and the symptoms really took over and the life you once had, you had to shift. And then Anne Marie, you also talked about grief. So what would be some advice you'd give to somebody that's newly diagnosed and of color at the same time, since there is that health discrepancy that, is something that needs to be constantly worked on by everybody in the community?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take it or you?
Sure. So, one of the things I think we as a community, we really need to look at how we define disability, and I'm going to say it and I'm going to say it loud. Disability is not bad. Having an illness is not bad. Too often in our travels, especially in my travels, I hear people, go quick with the, well, did you catch this? What do you eat? Is it contagious? You get people asking, did I do something for this to happen? Then you have some, people who, while I'm all for prayer is important. I have strong faith. There's a difference between prayer and guilt. And sometimes it's a fine line where, people feel guilty as if it was a sin of some sort that became part of their life. And now, I'm being tested, or it's because of what I did. No, no, then there's assumptions of you having MS, or you're not going to be able to have kids. You have MS, you're going to have to hurry up and get on disability. You're not going to have no job. Then all these assumptions. No. And I'm here to say, and I'm sure Dawn will agree, that we really have to shift our mindset in terms of how we look at disability, but more importantly, how do you define your MS?
I love that. I think looking at it from Definitely defining. How do you define it? I think finding your comfort zone in this journey, finding what works for you. That would be one part of the advice that I would give someone. But I would also, and this is being frank, I would also talk to them and say, start a financial plan.
Mm.
And we're talking about spotlighting the Black experience and having multiple sclerosis. I'm going to be completely honest again. We, as a whole, I would say, don't come from lots of money and lots of financial acumen or a situation where, great Aunt Bertie has stashed, 20,000 for me each month. And so my trust fund will take care of it, and other demographics have been known statistically to have these things. But generational wealth, thank you. And Black individuals don't necessarily have that. And so when you are diagnosed with MS, just like with other major catastrophic kind of illnesses, I would say MS is kind of catastrophic in some terms. But when you're diagnosed, you need to have some sort of financial plan in place. I had a wonderful job. I was making six figures. I was at one as a teacher because I had been in the system for quite some time. And I'm talking about when MS started to be visible. And so I had to really shift and change and start thinking about disability, short term, long term. Well, luckily, I had paid into a short term and long term plan. Well, initially, I didn't pay into the long term, but then when open enrollment came, I changed it, et cetera. My point is, I wish that I didn't make certain mistakes with my finances in terms of the planning, the disability portion, because it's very, very difficult. Unfortunately, healthcare is broken. We know this to be a fact. It is broken, and it's not just pharmaceutical companies or clinicians or doctors' offices, things like that. It is the entire system.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for these disability companies. And they don't necessarily, and this is just my opinion, they don't necessarily want to pay out.
Yep.
And so I struggled. And I had a wonderful house. I was married, had an infant, a young son at the time. And so my life completely changed. And the biggest advice I would say is have a financial plan. I would say the day you get your diagnosis, probably that week, you need to start planning.
And I'll even piggyback a little bit, because, research shows that a lot of times people are diagnosed with MS at the prime of their life. And with that being said, that prime is looked at in terms of you embarking on your career, you're embarking on your family, having a family, in that moment of having that diagnosis, just like Dawn said, plan for your financial, but again, plan all around. If you just started a new job, pay attention to the benefits. I don't know, but I remember when I first started my career, they give you that HR packet. It has a whole bunch of stuff in it, and you're just so happy to have a job. You just signing your life away.
Save it in a folder, and you maybe will one day read a page out of it.
Exactly. Pay attention to that folder. Because things like, it's not just a matter of insurance, just like Dawn said, there's long-term, there's short-term, there's accidental, there's a whole bunch of different insurances that you may need to use one day. Mm-hmm. So pay attention to that HR packet. Be honest with yourself in terms of if you want to have children, if you want to have a family, plan for that. Start that conversation with your doctor, and not only just with your primary doctor. Make sure that you have, your GYN as well as your MS doctor, your neurologist or MS specialist. Everyone should be a part of that conversation, but more importantly, part of your planning team. Start thinking from the avenue of teams and supports, whether it be, how you're going to pursue, work, how are you going to pursue home, how you're going to pursue your social life, because from a social perspective, things are going to change. I remember when I was diagnosed, I was that friend that drove everybody around. I was that friend that was like, where as long as there was gas in my car, we're out.
Yeah.
Having MS changed my social scene. I lost some friends because people was used to seeing that spontaneous Anne-Marie. And now my events and now my social activities are a little bit more planned. I may not go to a club after the club after the club.
Yeah, and you have to be selective because once you start seeing not only your life change, you both talked about grief, there has to be a new version of you that
Absolutely.
evolves and that requires boundaries as well. So, yes.
And the one last thing I'll say, disability looks different for us. And I say that we don't think it does because we feel like we're just like everyone else who is disabled, but it looks a little different for us because society has put all of these markers on. Yes.
Labels.
Yeah.
We live in a society that judges and constantly judge, and and then you add to it, you've been hearing all your life what disability is supposed to look like, what disability is. I mean, I'll never forget, I have a handicap plaque, and if you have a disability plaque for driving, you have to prove, your disability. And I'll never forget one day, I put my plaque and proceeded to leave the car, and an elderly person yelled at me, was like, "You can't park there." I was just like,
right. They probably thought the plaque was borrowed or something like that.
Exactly. And it was in that moment, they didn't see a cane, they didn't see a wheelchair, so they automatically assume. Same thing with bathrooms. People don't see a wheelchair, they don't see a cane, so they automatically assume when you're using that accessible stall. But all in all, one thing we know in the MS community, there's invisible symptoms as well as there's physical symptoms. And that dichotomy is always, always, up front and out there loud, because Monday you could look one way, but then Friday you could look like a totally different person, So not only having society understand that, but you yourself is going through it. Because again, we've been hearing for so long what disability is supposed to look like. Now here we are, and you start asking yourself, am I disabled? And then all the other things that comes with it, whether it's the guilt, whether it's the shame, whether it's, the fear, all of that comes. And in some respects, you have to heal from that too.
Yeah, that is all very great advice. And I do hope not only to those that are listening, if there is somebody that's newly diagnosed, but for those who watch this later, that they can help and get some resonate with this a little bit. I will switch the subject a little bit because we do have some questions and I want to include the audience into all of this. One of the first things is Jonette said, "Thank you for mentioning guilt. I'm still trying to find my way around this." And Zanetta wrote, "People assume that I'm healthy and that I don't need help. I have to do for myself and I'm injured often."
Too often in our community, doggone Beyonce and the whole "I am independent," put your hands up, and I'm a survivor. And, there's this whole mantra of, you have to be a strong Black woman. No, you don't.
I think women in general, we are raised from a very early age. And I've noticed this now transitioning into a different role in my own life that women have to manage the house, manage their kids, manage
There's this whole
life
thing
outside. Yes, they
of
have to play
having it all, having it
right.
all.
All the roles all at once, and each of them has to be executed flawlessly. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm. And I'm here to tell
not doing it
you,
well.
no. No, you don't.
Well,
You're
thank you for that.
first of all,
Um,
we're human, and we're not gonna be perfect all the time. Sometimes we're gonna make mistakes, Sometimes it's gonna be really hard, sometimes it's gonna be real easy, but it's what do you do in those places and spaces when you do have the challenges? That's what's most important. That's what you remember. That is what gives you strength to go another day.
Right. And you know what happened? And maybe this happened with you, Anne Marie. I was so strong, so independent for many, many years. I think I came out at birth saying, I'll do it myself. I'll change my own diaper. That's just how I was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so to I think it was Jeanette's point, or maybe it was Michelle's point, somebody had said they felt guilty. I struggled with asking for help and
Mm.
did not know when. I didn't know when to say when.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
really,
oh, I
you
hear you on that.
I think I'm one of those, but I think many people
Mm-hmm.
are definitely to some extent going to relate to that. I won't speak for everyone. I do want to get into that topic, but before we do, I want to ask this question that an anonymous attendee asked. Did any of you start DMTs immediately during those early times? And are you on DMTs now? So,
Great. That's a great question. Yes, I started DMT immediately. In fact, I'm on this very same DMT 20 plus years later. Um, for me, it was a matter of reading the science and understanding what would work with my lifestyle. At the time when I was diagnosed, there was only injectables, and you had to choose between either every day, every other day, or once a week. And so for me, the fewest works best. And again, I'm also from a place and space of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And for me, I spent many years being, well and well it in terms of what I define well. You know,
mhm.
that again, that goes back to in terms of how do you define, your MS? For me, I didn't have any new lesions. Excuse me, I was still able to do many tasks and participate in life in a productive way. So there wasn't a reason for me to change my meds. And knock on wood, it's still not.
I, I did start immediately,
Mhm.
and then I'm very stubborn, very hard-headed. And since I was in denial, and I'm being completely transparent with everyone, I took myself off of the initial DMT, and that is the one that Anne Marie is currently taking. I decided to take myself off of that, and I said I'm going to do everything all natural. So I went vegan, was a raw foodist for 2 years, did yoga, tai chi, meditation, everything you could think of that was healthy, thinking I could cleanse my body while I was in incredible denial, cleanse my body of this MS. And I don't think I did the whole spiritual. I did have people with the spiritual bypass, like, oh, God will fix it. And I was just like, no, I'm going to fix this right now. But it was because of
Right.
this tremendous amount of denial that I carried. Uh,
Mhm.
and then I saw my MS specialist, and she said, no, it's not, it's progressing. Even though you don't see rapid progression, MS
Right.
does progress over the years, and et cetera, et cetera. And I had a few MRIs, and I decided, okay, let's see where this goes, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to have children. I wasn't sure what I was doing. And
Mhm.
I was so nutty. I think I took a sabbatical and I went to Spain and I was like, I'm going to live here and I'll find an MS specialist over here. And, I was just kind of all over the place. I just wasn't, again, I just was in denial. And so I did start medication and I changed, I think I have taken 4
Mhm.
and the 4th one worked. And
That's the one you're
I'm
on.
not
Okay.
currently thinking that. And so I'm not sure if we can say what they are, but
That's up to you.
so I took Lemtrada. It was a hard decision, but I decided to do it. And so Lemtrada is, you take it twice, but year one, you take it, it's IV, you sit in the chair and for 5 days, you get 5-day injections or, IV
Infusions.
infusion. Thank you. And
Mhm.
year two, it's 3-day infusion. And it's a pretty heavy duty medication. So you have
Mhm.
to really talk to your clinician about it. But again, talk to your doctors, talk to your team that Anne-Marie spoke about earlier. Talk to everyone who is on your team because it is not an easy decision to switch DMTs or even go on DMTs, particularly Lemtrada. That's a lot. It was a lot.
There's one thing though I want to piggyback on that you said that really want to emphasize in that, while we're talking about medication and it's clear, both of us had different experiences. One thing that is common though, it's not just meds that helps with the healing. You know, there's there's a whole mind, body, and spirit that's attached. Meds is only going to take you but so far. And until you get your mind right, until you get your spirit right, it doesn't matter with your meds. You got to put all of that into perspective. And you may choose medication that's not for you, and that's fine. Just make sure it's an informed decision and you're doing all that you can do to be healthy. So what are you doing in terms of your diet? What are you doing in terms of exercise? What are you doing to minimize stress? Because all all of that is part of the healing process. It's not just one quick fix.
Right. And I do think it's important, going back to what you said, informed decision, and what Dawn said about the healthcare team. I think it's, at least from what I've seen, is any decision made, you are your best advocate, but you should
Absolutely.
also make your healthcare team known into your decision so they can help support you rather than decide for you. They're there to educate and to help. But at the end of the day, you have to advocate and decide, is this working for me
Mm-hmm.
or is it not?
Right. Exactly. And make sure that the information that you receive, because we're at a time now where we're getting thrown all kinds of information from a variety of places for a variety of reasons and intentions too.
Mhm.
So make sure that the information that you are receiving is from a reputable source. Whether it be, for example, we're here with MS Foundations, MS Focus, there's also the National MS Society. These are reputable places and spaces for information. Be careful if it's your cousin, uncle, brother, sister who told you about.
From WhatsApp.
Yeah, from yes, yes.
Yes.
And
With
one other,
no,
oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dawn.
I want to add one other piece, and Anne-Marie, definitely chime in because we've also spoken about this before. I think that and again, speaking from a person of color, I think that a lot of times we as a whole may not feel as empowered when we see our clinicians. When we go into the doctor's office, we have in our mind what we want to talk about. Hey, this medication makes me feel XYZ, but the doctor probably knows better and they'll just tell me no or what have you. And so a lot of people have intimidation when they speak to their doctor, their specialist, and they may not speak up about what it is that they need. And
mm-hmm.
that's where being your own advocate is best.
Absolutely.
And also understand that sometimes healthcare isn't equal. And we do have those doctors who I have not had this experience, but others have told me. And it's unfortunate that doctors don't listen and they don't want to hear what you have to say about certain medications or things that you've read. You know what's best for your body.
Absolutely.
So,
And in those moments when you have a situation where a doctor you don't listen, that doesn't listen to you, you may have to ask the hard question of, is it time to find a new doctor? Because at the end of the day, it's about you. It's about you as the patient. And let's be honest, if you do not like the direction your doctor is going with you, there's a good chance you're going to stop going to your appointments. And if you stop going to your appointments, who are you hurting? You.
Yourself. Yeah. No, that's a great point to both of you. And I know there's at least a lot of different articles out there about finding the right physician because I think for me, it's relatable to, as vain as it sounds, finding the right pair of heels. They may
yeah.
look good to others, people might like it, it might be a good fit on others, but you have to decide what's best for you and your care and your need. And everybody's living a different life, different finances, and complete
There's different bedside manner.
different geographic locations, so accessibility to different types of healthcare. Not everybody has infusion clinics near them, so maybe that also affects your healthcare. With that, I do want to ask this question that I've been holding on to. Um, Let me back up. Let me say this comment first that somebody kindly wrote. Anonymous attendee said, MS completely changed my life. I had a thriving business and a large friend group, or so I thought. Now I'm reliant on public assistance and have no friends. I try to find caregivers and am often taken advantage of. I'm wondering where to find reliable caregivers in my area in California. County program is not the place. Thank you for the information.
A lot of times I find when I have questions is to search out people like me. So you might want to reach out and see if there's a support group in your neighborhood, in your area, because just like I said earlier, we are the experts at this, and the same goes to supports, you may meet somebody at a support group that may be able to assist you with the caregiving aspect that you just talked about, whether it be an actual caregiver or at least point you in the direction of such. So I strongly suggest, if you're not in a support group, please think about it. Definitely think about it and take part, because you'd be surprised the wealth of information that you will get from someone who's going through exactly what you're going through.
Community is everything. For me. I would not have made it without my community, my MS community. Anne Marie is just so happens to be part of that. And it is amazing. And I honestly, and I feel for the anonymous attendee, because I was there. I purchased homes. I was successful. I had a great life. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, where are my friends? Where's my career? Where is my life? Who is this person?
Yep.
And it's not that I lost friends. It's just that I lost that type of interaction. I no longer, what they wanted out of me no longer served me.
Right.
So I was seen as the flaky friend. It was like, oh, well, you can't go out. Well, yeah, I'll go out. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes into the conversation, I'm like, well, I changed my mind. Well, why'd you change your mind? Well, because of MS. And they didn't understand. And
exactly. And you get tired of explaining it after a while.
And so I strongly will piggyback on what you're saying, Anne Marie. Community and finding the support group, finding people who can guide you kind of in the direction that you need would be really helpful.
And then also to add, I like to tell people, if there's ever a time to get MS, now is the time. Because support groups is they're just about anywhere and everywhere.
Right.
We're beyond just in-person groups. One good thing that came out of the pandemic is
Mm-hmm.
the
All
whole
the
virtual
different
world.
ways that internet connected everybody from
Absolutely.
everywhere. No, and
So, so there is definitely a community out there. If you add a group and maybe a particular group doesn't feel like it's for you, try another one because there are definitely options out there.
to just piggyback off of both of you, to the anonymous attendee and to anybody else that's looking for a support group in your area and don't know where to start, there are a few resources. Feel free to respond to your registration email, and I'm happy to send them. And we at MS Focus also have a support group coordinator. Her name is Marcia. She is lovely, and she can help you find a support group in your area. And if there isn't one, you can create your own, and then you'll share your experiences with other members as well, and we'll help provide the resources for you to go ahead and start. And thank you both, Anne Marie and Dawn, for giving that answer and that advice. I agree. Without the support of those who are sharing the experience with you, I think that's where you find the relationships that mean the most, because as you filter out your old life and your old friends, and to what Dawn was saying about, well, you have to explain MS to everybody. There is a point where if those that don't get it, they're not going to get it if you explain it 5 more times.
Exactly. And that in itself brings about stress.
Mhm.
So being able to be in a space, in a place where you're emotionally safe, it also brings about empowerment in terms of, okay, you know what? I can handle this. You know what? There's others that's listening to me. There's others that's been through this. They're hearing me. That's a
I
big
love the
one.
words you both of you are using, like advocate and empower. Those are, I think those are words that we don't hear enough
Mm-mm.
within the community.
Yeah.
So I love all of these words.
Yeah, it's creating a place where it's not just questions, it's
Mhm.
real conversations, and that's what
Right.
you get at a support group.
Without judgment. It's
Exactly.
more understanding each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wendy has a question. She said, thank you all. What happens when you are married and your partner, husband, or wife leaves and the financial planning has to change?
Mm, that's
Well,
a
uh,
Dawn, do you want to go first since you brought up financial planning initially?
yes. Uh, okay. So what happens? Can you just read that part?
Yeah. So she said, what happens when you're married and your partner, your husband, or your wife leaves and the financial planning has to change?
That goes back to my initial point, which was when you are given this diagnosis, have a financial plan. Have a plan with your partner or without, because not everyone is capable of managing MS and going on the journey with you. Not everyone is able to understand the day-to-day struggle.
Mm,
And I would say, if you can, if you are able to financially afford a financial planner or a cousin who has an MBA, someone who is really financially savvy, or a best friend, or someone who is really able to crunch numbers with you and sit down and talk real life situations. Well, what if? The what ifs, and
Mhm.
not in a way to scare you, but just to prepare you. You want to
mm,
be prepared for anything major, like, oh, I'm going to miss a mortgage payment. Okay, so what's going to happen? How am I going to make up that, $1,200 or however much, your mortgage is, or 14, something. Or I'm going to miss a car payment and a mortgage payment. I don't have that extra income. What can I do? Well, that's where that financial planner will help
mm.
you, work that out. But all of these things are done proactively. And so to answer this question, and I know it's probably easier said than done because when you're in it, it's really hard. But I did it the hard way. I didn't plan, and I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? So be proactive. That is my number one, I guess, mantra. Be proactive
Mhm.
and think ahead. Don't And I know there are a lot of people who are happily married and
Mhm.
partnership, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they will have something that where it has something to do with you, but they would like to go because of whatever reason, but still, look out for yourself. And I
And then, no, no, I just wanted to add real quick, you're absolutely right. And then there's also, some couples who are able to work something out,
yeah,
from the healthcare perspective. While the
Mhm.
marriage may resolve, they're able to work out something, so that the person may be able to continue to have benefits or continue to get the particular care. So, communication is key. But at the end of the day, as Dawn said, you have to plan for you.
right. I love that. That is so perfect. Perfect. Communication and having a plan, even while you're married. Like, well, what
What
happened?
if?
Exactly. Right. Have that plan. Be proactive and not reactive because when you're reactive, you end up in a situation, where it's chaotic and it's not easy being in chaos and having MS. It's not because MS is already chaotic.
And having those hard conversations. Like, I'm engaged, and I talk to my fiance in terms of, okay, how would you feel if, let's say, I can't work anymore? you know what would you do? What are some things we can do to plan? Have those hard conversations, because when you're married, when they say for worse the best, the worst, they like,
Medicine and help.
yeah, 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 everybody thinks it's really rich or poor. No, that health, 9 times out of 10, that health thing.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's one of those things that I was going to just put an additional note that I think communication is also something that once you're diagnosed or once you have this huge piece of news that's going to alter the entirety of the rest of your life, you have to talk to your partner and say, hey, I'm not sure what's coming, but are you able to handle that with me? Or is this something you feel like you just can't do? Because I think it's one of those things when people are put to the test, everybody can say it, but you have to figure it out. And I do love that both of you said, be proactive and plan A with your partner, but B for yourself, because at the end of the day, it is all about the person being diagnosed.
And
Thank you for that.
trust your providers because sometimes people have really, really good providers and you can lean on them and say, hey, this is taking a toll on me financially. I have this medication, I have that medication, I have physical therapy, I have the copay,
mhm.
I have, I haven't met my deductible, all of these things that come into our lives that we don't, the unexpected. I have this emergency room visit because I fell out, I had vertigo, all of those things. And so when you talk to your doctors, I think they can kind of, if you have trust, if you have a good relationship with them, I think they can also point you in the right direction. And then going back to what we were saying about building community, how Anne Marie had said, oh, join a support group. You would be surprised how many people know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. So network. I think that is amazing. I have met so many people from our support groups who have helped in many ways because I had
Mhm.
to transition. I had to leave my career and pivot and changed complete careers. And
Mhm.
I've met so many wonderful, amazing people through networking and through this community. And and that's because we're all here to help each other. And I do want to tell the anonymous attendee, reach out to me as well because we're all here. We've been there and we're here in it together. And there's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I will ask this question since you brought up support and help and brought up the hyper independence. that comes, I think, with the three of us. I'm already sensing it, but I'm sure it's out there too. How did you learn to ask for help in the times that you needed help, but your
Whew.
body and brain said, no, I can do it by myself?
Ego is a very interesting thing, and when your ego get hurt enough, oh, you'll learn how to say, "I need help." At the end of the day, and it was a lesson I had to learn. You know, pushing yourself does more harm to me than it does to others. And once I realized that, you know, it made it a little bit easier. Now, again, I still struggle. I'm an only child, so I'm used to doing things on my
Mhm.
own. I got some trust issues. As I like to say to my friends, I never learned unconditional love. So it is what it is. I'm an only child. So, I having to ask, is a big deal for me, but knowing when to ask and what to ask, and most importantly, who to ask.
Mhm.
That's something that you really have to maneuver, because not everybody should be privy to that type of space and place of you. You know, just like there's a lot of people that may not help you, there's a lot of people that you may not want their help from either. So
Mhm.
understanding and being able to navigate that is also important. I remember when I was like in the early years of being diagnosed, I lived in an apartment building, and I had stairs, and laundry was in the basement, and all of these things that for a regular person is no big deal. But for me,
Mhm.
trying to maneuver the shopping bags, trying to maneuver the laundry, it was a lot. And my neighbors would see me, it's an apartment building, so you can't help but see them in your passing. And one of my neighbors just came straight out and was like, "Do you need help?" And it was like in that moment, I just broke down in tears, because I did, but I didn't know who to ask. How do you ask your friends, can you do my laundry? I'll go shopping sometimes with my friends, but there was a lot of times when they were doing what they had to do and they couldn't go shopping with me. So, how do you go about it? So when she presented that opportunity, not only did, it opened the door, but it also got me to thinking, if she's looking at me and wondering how she could help, who else is wondering out there that in terms of how they could help? And I started that conversation with people in my community.
That's great. What a great story.
For
Dawn.
for me, trust is also a big issue, and I think when I recognize that those around me were they were I don't know what the right word is, but they held my vulnerabilities tight. And if
Mm,
I can trust you with my vulnerabilities, then I feel like I can let my guard down and ask.
Mhm.
So it took some time to ask anyone that was outside of my parents for
Yeah.
any type of help. And I'm still very guarded in terms of who I ask and what I ask, because if
mm,
I ask for something, it may be, I don't know, hey, do you feel like driving? If we were going somewhere, I'm not, it'll be something small like that. I don't really feel like driving, but I won't ask anything major unless it's from, my family. Uh,
Mhm.
and that didn't come until, oh gosh, almost 20 years later.
yeah.
Being
At
diagnosed.
least it came.
Yes.
At least it's progressing. So,
Oh, absolutely. It takes time, and another thing is I realized that there's a lot of people that do want to help.
mhm.
I gave the story in terms of, my my neighbor, but just in terms of my actual friends, through the years, Many of them, while they know that they know the journey, they know I have MS, some are, a little more involved than others. But all in all, when I fall, they're there to pick me up. If I need help with an appointment, I know I could count on them, and it's one of those things where you learn in time.
Mm-hmm.
So you just, so you can't be afraid to be vulnerable because unfortunately, with this illness,
You have to be.
absolutely, but keep your eyes and your ears open and assess accurately. If people are not giving you what it is that you need in a way that you feel supported,
Mm-hmm.
they're not the ones. I had dated this guy one time and he knew I had MS. And he and I went to an MS event. And up until that point, all he knew about MS is what I told him about MS. And what he saw was Amory in 3-5 inch heels, running all over the place, dancing. And so that was his picture of MS. We went to this event and he got to see a whole nother side of MS.
Mm-hmm.
He got to see, people in wheelchairs, people using adaptive equipment. And I'll never forget, we came home and he was a little quiet. And he woke up the next morning and he said to me, I don't think I could do this anymore. And that's how he broke up with me. And as much as it hurt, I said, thank you for your honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this is what scares you
already, then it's just not.
You're not the one for me.
Right. And now you're engaged.
With someone that totally understands.
Congratulations. That is beautiful. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I think what goes with this also is us feeling like we are a burden because MS is so burdensome to us, and we know how we feel day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute.
Yep.
So it's like, oh my God, how can I even burden someone?
Exactly.
Because I'm carrying my guilt, I'm carrying my shame. Now I'm carrying having to ask somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to be the strong Black woman,
Exactly.
It's ingrained.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to do it all. So asking for help is how are you supposed to offload your burden? Like you should be able to handle it and then help others offload theirs, not vice versa. Yeah.
Find a therapist. That's all.
That's another thing. Right after you find that support group, find a good therapist.
I think that's a great piece of advice. We have about 5 minutes left, and there's one question I want to ask. Dawn, I think you sent it, but I know you and Anne Marie discussed all of them. Having it all, what does that mean when you have been diagnosed with a chronic illness? I'll give each of you a couple minutes to go ahead and answer before we wrap it up for this evening. So, Dawn, do you want to go first? Because your smile looks like you.
Oh, sure. I'll keep it simple and then chime in at some point, I guess. Having it all, I think you have to define what that means.
Absolutely.
I believe that you can, but you have to really understand having it all in what areas. And what is that? Like I said, what does that mean to you? Can you? I don't know. I don't know. Do you strive? Like, is that a goal of yours? What are your goals in terms of having it all?
Mm-hmm.
And is it important?
That part. What is all and what is it important?
Mm-hmm.
And what is important, and understanding that all is going to change. What is all today is not necessarily going to be all tomorrow. In the spirit of MS being unpredictable, that whole idea of all is also just as unpredictable, because as you change, your needs change. As your needs change, your wants change. While there are some things that do stay constant, we all want to be happy. Everybody talks about that. I want to be happy. I just want to be happy. Well, what does happy look like for you? Because that changes. Like I said, there's a time where a good party around a whole bunch of people and all of that was happiness for me. Now, snuggling up with my cat brings quite a lot of joy into my life, believe it or not. But again, what it is that you define as your priorities, what it is that you define as your all, that is what's important. And that's that's what works.
Absolutely.
That was beautiful. I have no comments for that.
I see we have cat people in the house. Hey.
I'm a dog person, but I do like cats. No, I think that's when I read that question initially, I wanted to make sure I asked both of you because I think the theme in chronic illness is how do I adjust? I had it all. Now I don't have any of it. So now what do I do? But I think that's why I wanted to ask because you both saying all changes.
Absolutely.
The definition of happiness changes. So I think for everybody that listens and will listen, all is just a word, in my opinion. You can what I want now, what my happiness looks like is not what it looked like 10 years ago. I snuggle up with my dogs.
and just imagine what it's going to look like 10 years from now.
Yes.
Because
yeah, go ahead.
for me, having it all is being able to feel and not tingle and not having spasticity. So having it all is getting a good night's sleep, and not waking up because my bladder is going nuts, or just going out with friends for dinner and not having to embarrass myself having an accident because my bladder is acting up. All of that's having it all. That's all. Going to Barnes and Noble and getting the latest Oprah Book Club collection or something.
Exactly. Remembering what I want when I walked into the room. Hello.
That's it. Having it all is, it is so, it's just so different when you have these eyes to look through now with looking at MS, because all is not what all was pre-diagnosis. Post-diagnosis, it's completely different.
Exactly.
And like you said, Anne Marie, all can shift from what today is to tomorrow.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you both so much. While I don't host, this was lovely to host with both of you. And I know there's comments flooding in the chat, thanking both of you, asking when you ladies can do this again, because it was very informative. And I am very grateful that both of you dedicated this time. And I know MS Focus is also grateful to both of you for sharing your experiences, but also giving words of wisdom and advice to those that are going through this process and this change in their life, whether they just got diagnosed or they've been diagnosed for years or decades. So thank you truly for I think if you make a heart, no, it's iPhone. Because if you make a heart emoji comes, but not. On that note, to everybody that is listening, we just want to thank the panelists again and thank you all for attending and registering and participating actively in this panel discussion. Our next webinar is going to be on Thursday, December 4th, which I think is next week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern with Dr. Boster, and it's going to be the MS expert. So if you
He's a good one.
He is great. Very lovely. If you have any questions, MS related, that you want to bring, please bring it next Thursday to his event. And this session was recorded. It's live streamed on Facebook, so you can watch it about a couple minutes after I close this off if you want to just revisit all the topics that were talked about today. And it will be on our YouTube channel as well, so you can watch it as many times as you want for the rest of YouTube's existence. And once again, thank you, Anne Marie, and thank you, Dawn, for all of your shared wisdom. Thank you for sharing the experiences, and thank you for being so transparent and honest. I hope you all have a lovely evening and enjoy your holidays if you celebrate. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.